I guess I'll tell a quick story. I don't know if I've told this on the podcast before, but I was always pretty physically active. I played sports through high school a little bit. I stayed active through college, and I have 4 kids or boys, so we're pretty active family. And I have tried to stay pretty active. And I've done a couple different boot camps over the years and different gyms. And about, I guess this was pre-COVID. I want to say between 2018. I did a gym workout. I was with a group, and I was probably a month or 2 in, getting in pretty good shape, kind of re-engaging. And I ended up we did a floor workout in a really seedy gym, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just an old basement gym. And I'm going to say it's not even the gym's fault, but I had a cut in my elbow. And after this hour and a half workout, the next day my elbow was swollen, and I thought that I had just bruised it. Long story short, it turned out to be a staph infection in my elbow. I ended up in the hospital. I had to be on IV antibiotics. It was like a nightmare. It was rough. So I kind of, and I was fine, but it was a couple days of a little bit nervousness, redness spreading up my arm. My doctor had earlier joked like, "Oh, might have to saw your arm off." And then 2 or 3 days later, I'm in the hospital. I was like, "That's actually not funny." It was not a funny comment, because I really had to. Anyway, so what it did is it knocked me out of working out. I almost had like a little bit of PTSD for a couple of years. Now, I was somewhat active, coaching and doing some other things, but it took me a while, Erin, to kind of get back to working out. And I don't know what the motivation was. I finally, about 6 months ago, made a promise to myself that I would do it. And I finally found somebody, and now I've been back active again several days a week, and it's really has been phenomenal. I do always wear long sleeve shirts now, because I'm always worried I'm going to get some infection somewhere. But so I've got some residual nervousness about it, but it's been awesome to get back and moving. And I'm not quite at this 50-year mark, but I'm pretty darn close. And I know that it just gets harder and harder and harder. One of the really important things that we know, besides diet, is movement and being healthy. And I wanted to kind of get back to your theme around, your podcast. You're interviewing people that are professionals that are helping really people that are 50 plus get moving. How often is it people getting back moving after not, or they just, what's the state of play if you're 50 in America right now? Are you more likely that you've been a couch potato and you're not moving? Is it a small percentage of people? How many people kind of get back to it? What do you think the state of play is?
Yeah, so really the majority of Americans, just across the board, are not getting the physical activity that's required, that's put out by American College of Sports Medicine with the cardiovascular and strength training. So most people aren't. However, what I find encouraging is they've done a study, and on the over 65 population, it is growing. So I think it was like 1990 to about 2019, it was like 4% of people over 65 were meeting the physical activity requirements. And now it's like close to 4%. Yeah, 4%. And now it's getting up to 14%, which of course is definitely, the minority. But I choose to look at it it's growing. Like
it's massive progress.
It is progress. I consider it progress. And people over 50 are getting more and more concerned about health span. And a big part of that is physical activity and being able to retain our physical abilities as we get older. So there's an increased focus on health span, even though most people aren't meeting the physical activity guidelines. So I think that that's encouraging. And a lot of those people that are active, they are inspiring those of us that maybe don't have that level of activity, but they're showing us what's possible in those later stages of life. And those are a lot of the people that I feature on my podcast.
Yeah. So you feature professionals that are helping folks that are 50 plus. Are they 50 plus? Tell us about your podcast just a little bit.
The vast majority of my podcast guests are over 50, and they've taken on a second act career endorsing physical activity. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a personal trainer, although I did interview world's oldest active personal trainer. He's 81 and he's a retired financial planner. So they're not necessarily a personal trainer, which we think of as a fitness professional, but they are encouraging physical activity. And I've had people that are conducting clubs for outdoor enthusiasts. So there's a Pikes Peak Over the Hill gang in my local area, and it's a social club for outdoor sports. So they're skiing together, they're hiking together, golf, pickleball, and it's wildly popular. So I try to feature all the different ways.
Wait, Pikes Peak, but so you're Colorado
Yeah.
Springs.
Yes.
So you're in the kind of the mecca of Colorado is such an amazing outdoor place. The weather's better than people think. It's really kind of it's really conducive to being active.
Definitely.
And I think though the other thing that through some of your work that I've read and listened to is that it's not necessarily about going and finding a trainer per se, because you don't have to go to a gym and start moving necessarily and lifting and doing squats.
Yeah.
It's really just about figuring out a way. And I guess this is the thought around blue zones where we're kind of to active places where we're just automatically moving. Maybe talk about just how do we engage or incorporate being active without actually having to go to the gym.
Yeah, you don't have to go to a gym. But first and foremost, it has to be fun. I mean, we're adults. We adult all day long, and it should be something that's enjoyable. And so I think that's first and foremost, like find something that's fun for you so it doesn't feel like work and a slog. And some people it is the gym, but some people it's not. And I also think about, what are the physical abilities that you want to have decades from now? So your moving today is going to determine how you move tomorrow. So I think about movement that way. And movement is a much more palpable thing to think about than like exercise, which makes us think like working hard and going to the gym and the grind and all of that. But any movement that you're doing today, you're making deposits into what I call your physiological 401k. So what you do today, this is a retirement podcast, determines what you get to do tomorrow and the day after that. So think about movement in that way. And, for example, I sit on the floor a lot because I want my 90-year-old self to be sitting on the floor. So I'm going to make those investments now and do things now so that my future self can continue to have this ability. So I think if we think about movement that way and how we can make investments in our movement patterns and what we want to be able to do, we all know people older than us, and we can see areas that they struggle and things that they can't do. And what do you want for yourself? Like, what do you need to be doing now so that you can do it in the future?
So it's maybe we have this culture, and again, maybe this is my bias, but I guess we to some extent we have this like Planet Fitness culture where we see gyms all over the place, and we think about working out is we've got to go to some sort of place and some sort of gym, but I think that what you're saying here is to kind of just stop thinking about it that way. And so obviously that's fine. Great. If you do that, you go sign up. But the reality here is just activity and movement. Now, that's not easy in every urban environment, though.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody lives in Colorado Springs. So I guess my question is that what if your neighborhood isn't necessarily, what do we give us some actionable ideas around getting moving if you don't live have a wonderful trail in your backyard?
Yeah. Find ways that you can stack movement into your everyday life. So it doesn't have to be a 20, 30-minute workout. That could mean if you have a community mailbox, you don't drive to the community mailbox, you walk to the community mailbox. Anytime you sit down, you're going to do 3 to 5 sit-to-stands before you sit down. If you're in your kitchen and you're waiting for the water to boil, maybe you're doing countertop push-ups. These are all ways that we can just get movement throughout our whole day. If you're going to the grocery store, rather than pushing the cart to your car, you're going to carry your groceries to the car. And finding ways that we can walk a little bit more. Maybe it's just, parking further out so you walk into the store. These are all little ways that we can get movement into our life and build a more movement-rich lifestyle. That doesn't necessarily mean exercise, going to the gym, which is all great. But finding ways that you can move more throughout your day and not always defaulting to machines, escalators, elevators, chairs that get us up to standing. If you don't have to, find ways that you can use your body to do those things. And I think that's a much more accessible way to enter a more movement rich lifestyle.
Well, I was going to ask you, and I think it's now the wrong question. I was going to say, well, how do you find one of these health professionals? I mean, you obviously interview
Mhm.
often different people that are helping folks that are 50 plus, and they're active. This is their second act career. So that is one, right? So it's one thing to find those professionals. And I want to ask, how do you do that? And then I guess the other one, and the reason I'm saying that's maybe the wrong question, it's not necessarily about finding fitness professionals. And it's really finding groups that propagate or help facilitate just movement in general, to kind of like your Pikes Peak group. So let's start with, how do you find someone that can kind of kickstart you?
Yeah. So if you're looking for a fitness professional that specializes with older adults, you can certainly go to gyms and interview the trainers and see if they have training in working with older adults. Functional Aging Institute is a wonderful resource. It's where I got my training from, and they offer a lot of continuing education certifications for fitness professionals that specifically want to work with the over 50 population. And they have a website with a directory of people that have been trained through them. So finding those people that have specifically trained with this demographic can be really important, just to make sure that you are working with somebody that's aware of things that tend to happen as we get older, and that they can equip you with, building the capacities that you want, so you have the physical abilities throughout the rest of your life. But I think interviewing, making sure you're getting the right professional, and also just somebody that you resonate with. I mean, just this is somebody that you're working with. I think we do this for any kind of service that we have, whether it be a financial planner, real estate agent. Make sure that there's a connection there with that person, that not only do they have the credentials and the qualifications, but you feel comfortable with them and you can trust them.
I remember I think it was a spin class or some sort of class that I did at one point, and the instructor would yell out, "Even flow, Joe had a coach." And it's almost anybody, even if you're an elite athlete, it does help to have someone there, whether it's teaching, improving, motivation. But what does it cost to do this? And I would contend that the cost is minimal relative to the gain here.
Mhm.
But what do people usually pay if you're engaging someone like this? And how often do you need somebody to coach you?
For personal training in particular, you're going to be paying at a minimum $50 an hour for a trained professional. And it could easily go closer to $100 an hour for that one-on-one training. A lot of trainers are doing small group training sessions. So it can be a way to get more social connection and work with people, so you have that camaraderie aspect. And then you're usually going to pay a little bit less. And it could be, closer to $40, $50 per session for a group training session. And those can be ways that, you're making an investment in your health. So this is more of, I think of fitness and exercise as true health care. We're caring for somebody's health. So it's preventative, and it's an investment in that preventative care, rather than, a lot of times healthcare, what we call healthcare now, is actually sick care, and we're just managing sickness and illness. This is a way to maintain your physical abilities going forward. So that's how I would think about what you're paying for your trainer. It's an investment in your health.
Yeah, and when you think about, it's funny to think of that 50 is old, but 50 is not old. Let's just say that for our listeners, 50 is not old. But when you're starting to, when you're doing workouts in your 50s and then your 60s and your 70s and up, the exercises I think it does make sense that they're more functional. And as I've learned more and more about this population and the kind of exercises that may make some sense, they're around being able to, if you recover from a fall or not get hurt if you were to fall, or how to sit down and get up and use those muscles that are, and I guess what you would call this in a very functional way. This is functional exercise. Can you kind of explain that to our listeners?
Yeah, if you're going to be exercising at a gym or even on your own, you want to find exercises that are mimicking day-to-day life. So that's squats. Like we squat, we sit down all day long, whether it's at the dining room table, bathroom, whatever. We're doing squats all day long. So that's a really important exercise. Deadlifts, we're carrying load from the floor and we're bringing it up towards us, or we're lifting load over our head. So like shoulder pressing, pushing and pulling with our upper body. These are all things that we do day to day life. And so if we mimic those with our workouts, it makes us better equipped for those day-to-day activities. That if we need to, pick up, maybe it's a small pet or a grandchild from the floor, that is essentially a deadlift. So if we can practice those movements,
Thinking about picking up a grandchild.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're holding the grandchild and sitting down with them, that's like a goblet squat. So where you're having the weight or holding a weight in front of you and you're sitting down and up. These are things that we are doing day to day. Groceries, you have your bag of flour and you're putting it up on the top shelf. Like that is a shoulder press type of action. So I always say we lift weights all day long. We just don't always, they're just not shaped like dumbbells. They're shaped as babies and groceries and small pets. So think about how you're moving day to day with load, a gallon of milk, that's load. And you're pulling it off the shelf. See if you can do things that mimic those activities so that they just become easier for you as you get older. And it's not something that, is a struggle.
Tell us I'd love to hear some stories around, or I'd love for you to share some stories that you've either had because you do group training for seniors and also some of your guests. I mean, there was a story that I recall of someone who was kind of out of shape. This is I think you were interviewing a male trainer who their client was out of shape. They got them back into shape. They unfortunately passed away, I think was the story. However, they're that latter part of their life being more in shape was much better than prior. And I think that's kind of I'd love to hear that kind of motivation around getting back in shape because
Yeah. I've had a couple of guests. So one memorable story was from a fellow trainer, and she was training a gentleman that was 95, and he was getting back into doing physical activities. And he said, I really want to get back to revving my chainsaw again. He was, chainsawing with wood. And he's like, I want to get back to that. So, they used bands and they were pulling, and she was able to get him back to revving a chainsaw, which is not the first thing you think of when you think of like, I'm going to train a 95-year-old. What should I have him do? You think of like squats, but it was training him to using his chainsaw again, because that was a meaningful activity for him. So that was a very memorable story. And of course,
wow. So did he get back to using the chainsaw?
He got back to using the chainsaw. Yeah. After training with her. So that was one of my more memorable stories. And of course, since then he's passed, and that was years ago that she had trained him, but that was one of her most memorable stories. And then I had interviewed a guy who had retired. He was working in the college system. He retired, and he was in his 60s. He decided, I really need to I have more time on my hands. I'm going to make investment in myself and in my health. And he decided to start weightlifting and start going to the gym in his 60s. So he walked into a 24-hour fitness.
So hold on, he had never really done it before?
No, it was kind of touch and go. He would sometimes be a little more active in his life than other times, but he had never really had a dedicated.
But relatively inactive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never had a dedicated exercise program. So in his 60s, he decided to walk into a gym and he'd hire a personal trainer. And he started his weightlifting program in his 60s, and he's now in his 70s. He's got a popular Instagram account, and he's lifting heavy weights in his 70s. And he is showing that it's not too, you can't be too old. It's not too late. You can start in your 60s. You can start in your 70s, build capacity, of course. But he's just an inspiration, and I call him an Instagram encourager to show people like what's possible later in life. And he's been a very inspirational story. He's had setbacks, but he stays the course. And so I think having examples like that for people is so important, because so many times people discount their physical abilities simply based on age alone. And a lot of times there's a great quote that's we are limited more by our beliefs than by age itself. And so when we show people that are doing the things that people didn't think was possible, it makes people rethink of what's possible at that stage of life.
Social media encouragers, not necessarily influencers.
Yes, that's how I think of it.
What about the thought around it's not that uncommon that, first of all, people do get hurt working out. So there's, and I'm not, let's disregard my weird story about being, getting some sort of weird infection, but people do get hurt working out. And I know that doctors, sometimes the medical community will maybe poo-poo what you're able to do in the gym to some extent. Do you see that as part of the issue here? Is that, oh, well, once you reach a certain age, you shouldn't be doing that?
Yes, there's a lot of ageism. Our culture really fosters this idea of what older people are capable of, and we see this a lot in our environment. And it influences older adults' abilities and fitness levels. When we are shown images of only older people lifting small, tiny dumbbells, and the healthcare system can be the same way. Yeah, like, I mean, you hear stories where people,
The 1 pound weights.
yeah, exactly. And I always think, like, what if that was a 20-year-old holding 1 pound weights? Like, that would be weird. But when it's somebody with a gray hair, you're like, oh yeah, we see that all the time. You know, pictures of old people lifting small weights. But but it's also, what does that communicate? It communicates that old people are weak. And that's what it communicates, even though it doesn't explicitly say that. And we can see this in healthcare. We see it all over. And you hear stories of people where their doctors are discounting them. Well, you're 70 now, you just have aches and pains. Or people are just handed a cane because they're 90. Well, you know, maybe that's not necessarily the case for that person. And so I think we need to get to this place where we're challenging that. And a lot of my podcast guests, I feel like, are really challenging the images of what we see with this older population when we have rock climbers and we have low flying trapeze for people over 60. It's challenging what we
Hold on. Whoa. Let's go back to
yeah.
that. So you've got people in their 60s rock climbing. And I don't even, what is what is it?
Low flying trapeze.
Power trapeze.
Low flying trapeze. Yeah. So it's not as high, you know, where you're like, you think about the circus and they're like sky high. It's not that high.
Sure.
But it's high enough to get their feet off. I forget the exact level, but it's high enough to get their feet off the floor and they can swing. It's a form of circus art. And I have a lady in her 70s that teaches the class for people from their 60s to their 90s are doing low flying trapeze. And when you hear that, you think like, wait, what? Like, you don't think of that for an older adult. So it's challenging those beliefs.
Low flying. I don't know if you've ever even heard of that. I've seen people set up tight ropes between trees that are pretty low. Maybe that's a little different than trapeze. Trapeze is swinging.
It's swinging.
Where maybe I'm thinking about tightrope walking, which looks really, really difficult, by the way.
No, yeah, trapeze is swinging.
How about, maybe talk a little bit about yoga. Do you see folks, how do you like yoga as an exercise and for someone who are, call it 50 plus?
Yeah, I think yoga is a phenomenal exercise. One thing about yoga is it really ties into like your inner landscape. It ties into breath. It can make you more mindful. So I think it can really help with anxiety, things like that. And it can be a great physical practice for opening up your body. I think yoga is fantastic. But do it if you enjoy it. I mean, that's the big thing. Like if it's not fun, people aren't going to stick with it. So if you don't like yoga, like don't do it. Or maybe find 1 or 2 poses that you do like. If it feels good in your body, do that. I think yoga can be a phenomenal practice.
Is there, I guess then you would say there's really no exercise that we shouldn't do. It's pretty much whatever is fun, we should be doing and not have limitations on what we should or shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, I wouldn't put limitations on it. The 2 things that I would keep in mind is if you have not been active at all and you are just now starting a physical activity program, a couple of things I would keep in mind that happen with age are, your reaction time and being able to quickly move, your physical ability to move quickly, and your bone health. So those are things to keep in mind if you're starting later in life and if you don't already have a movement practice. So I'm not saying don't do those things, but just be mindful of how you are building that capacity and easing into exercises like pickleball. I mean, that pickleball is great, but does require quick movement, reaction time. So give yourself time to ease into those activities. But I say, sky's the limit. If you want to do it, do it. And find the right people to guide you and build up those physical abilities.
It's funny. I saw a research report from a financial services firm that was predicting the cost on the healthcare system in the United States it was some, multi-billion-dollar number because pickleball has gotten so popular. And of course, it's of course, there's more injuries nominally because there's more people playing pickleball than ever. And it's something like ER visits and broken bones and surgeries because of pickleball are going to cost the country billions of dollars. But of course, I think obviously the other side of that is that what are the health benefits of people actually being outside, being active, of course.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, that's kind of the issue I have with some of those things is the healthcare costs with pickleball injuries. And a lot of those injuries are, one, they're acute, so they're not lasting a lifetime like cardiovascular disease, and they're not taxing the healthcare system like diabetes, where those are really like long haul, tend to be long haul types of diseases. Whereas this is injuries, and like, what is this doing for people's mental health and social health? And so I think the upside of pickleball far outweighs the downside. I would much rather see somebody coming in to a hospital from a pickleball injury than a broken
Diabetes.
or diabetes or a
Yeah.
broken hip because they fell down the stairs. That should just be like a day-to-day activity we should be able to do. So that's really I'm all for pickleball.
Well, tell me some of the other maybe creative ways. I mean, you've already mentioned trapeze, low flying trapeze, but you're in Colorado where it's like there's no limit on activities out there for some, which is it's a wonderful thing about Colorado. But what are some other innovative or just interesting ways that you've seen people get make sure they stay active?
Yeah, so there is a couple of ladies that are doing parkour for people over 50. It's parkour for seniors. This takes place in Wisconsin, and these two ladies have teamed up, and they take adults out to the playground, and they practice parkour, which is typically known. Typically, you think of a lot younger people doing parkour, and you can think of like stunt doubles and things like that. But
hold on, what is parkour?
Yeah.
Hold on, parkour. What is that?
Yeah, so essentially,
What is parkour?
yeah, essentially it is locomotion, but a lot of times you'll see people, a lot of stunt double stuff, like, on the extreme end of things, it's people jumping off of buildings and jumping off of railings. And it is, it can be a pretty risky sport for those that are very advanced in it.
Oh, you see these things on social media where people are like jumping from a building to a railing
Yes.
to a stair to
Yeah.
Okay, so that's called parkour. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But this is like a light version of that.
Yeah, this is a scaled down version of that, of course. So it's taking that parkour concept and that locomotion, like at its core, it's how do you get from point A to point B? And yeah, you could jump off of a building. That's one end of it. Or maybe it's like a leap, or maybe you are crawling, or maybe you're rolling. So they're showing all these different ways that we can locomote with our bodies, and it's more of a playful practice. And they're taking older adults out onto playgrounds and doing that. It's really a fall resiliency program. They're showing people how to fall, how to recover from a fall, how to be comfortable maneuvering on the ground and maneuvering your body in different ways. So that's a really creative, very fun way that that they're keeping those people there physically active.
Two brand new words I've never heard before. One, parkour. Second, and I've never heard of locomotion.
Oh yeah,
Those are two new words here to the podcast. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, how about just nutrition? I mean, is it? I think of if you're unhealthy, you're not moving. It's a wonderful leap to get moving and get active again, or for the first time. I think of diet maybe as a similar challenge where you can have an unhealthy diet for a long time, but it's kind of never too late to get back to a healthy diet or restart a healthy diet. Have you seen people be able to make that switch, or is that even harder than getting back moving?
Yeah, people make that switch. Sometimes I find that healthy habits can stack on top of each other. So maybe somebody starts moving and they start a pickleball practice, and now they start thinking about their nutrition. Like, what do I need to do to fuel this activity? So I think sometimes physical activity can get people more engaged in their nutrition and thinking about how they need to be feeding their body to support the activities that they're doing. And sometimes it works reverse. Sometimes people start thinking like they want to change their diet and feel a little bit better. And then they start thinking, well, what else can I be doing for my health? And now maybe I'll start a movement practice or exercise. So I think that they can complement each other very well. And sometimes it starts with one and then they build other health habits on top of that. And nutrition is important. We want to make sure that we're having the nutrition to fuel the activities that we want to do, because nutrition is energy. So our body needs that. Our bones need all of our organs need that nutrition. So I think it's important to, make sure we're feeding ourselves, especially for those people that are very active. And protein's is an important part for older adults.
Well, I guess part of that is that what is your experience with folks that are helping with nutrition as well? Because I think that's hard too. It's we live in we live in a world with information overload.
Yeah.
So there's a million people that can supposedly help you working out. There's a million people talking about this diet or that diet. I guess, is it not necessarily about finding the perfect person for nutrition, but finding how many of these professionals that are helping folks 50 plus, are they also helping with diet and nutrition, or is that somebody separate usually?
Some are strictly just teaching a movement practice, and that's all they do. But I have interviewed health coaches, and health coaches are really there trained to teach and help people and be a guide for them along adopting healthy habits. And so health coaches are really trained to put their client in the driver's seat of how they want to build a healthier lifestyle. So health coaches are doing that, and they're very skilled at partnering with their client in that regard. I've also interviewed people that are, I'm going to see if I get this right, functional integrated nutritionists, where they are certified in nutrition specifically and specialize in working with people over 50 on nutrition and looking at their blood work, seeing how they can help them with their nutrition habits, but also just really making it about them and making sure that this is realistic for them. It's not dictating this is what you eat. It's more of acting as a guide for them. So there are people that are specialized in that.
So that's a functional integrated nutritionist.
Yeah, it's a certification that they have. So I've interviewed a few people that have certified in that.
And then when it comes to health coaches, Erin, are there any particular any certifications that we should be looking for that are kind of what would be an industry type standard if you're looking for somebody who's a health coach or something like this? And PT and someone who's a personal trainer too. I guess those are two separate things: a health coach, a personal trainer. Is there anything we should be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I would look that people have a certification and see if that certification is like an accredited certification, so that they have the training, the credentials. When it's accredited, it means that certification met certain standards. So, looking for those health coaches that have the certification. They're not just calling themselves a health coach. There's they went through some training for that. Same with personal trainers. There are accredited personal training certifications.
Are there hundreds of different accreditations and licenses or certifications, or are there like a top few?
There's a top
three
few
or four
for
that are
personal
really
training.
good?
There's a top
Okay.
few. Health coaches, I'm not sure quite with the health coaches. Which ones, how many are accredited. But yeah, I would look for a nationally known certification at NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning Association, American College of Sports Medicine.
NSC is one.
Yeah, American College of Sports Medicine, National Academy of Sports Medicine. Like some of these are some of the well-known accredited certification companies.
Is it true that the Norwegian study or the Scandinavian study that playing tennis adds 9.7 years to your longevity and your life expectancy?
Oh, I have not heard that. I have not.
Oh, you have not
No,
heard
I
this?
have not. I have not. Oh, interesting.
For some reason, there's always these great studies out of Scandinavia, or I guess it feels like so many interesting studies are from Norway or Sweden or whatever it might be. But they looked, and it was a long study. I think it may have been a couple multi-decade study that tracked different physical activities and then correlated those to longevity. And it was pretty much anything that was active did relative to the control group that wasn't active, added, a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years to on average longevity. But tennis was number one. And tennis added on average almost almost a decade of longevity
Wow.
to the participants of the study. So I've always been fascinated by that particular study. And I do think about some of the families that I work with over the years. If you're playing, think about this, if you're playing tennis and you're 78, that's a pretty darn good sign of your current state of health. And so maybe there's a little bit of causation versus correlation, but I think there's got to be, I think it probably works both ways. If you're 80 and you're playing tennis still, my goodness, there's a lot of things that have to be going right for that.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's a very reaction, based sport. Yeah. I think that it's phenomenal. And there's a social component too. So I think that's amazing. Yeah.
Well, and I think that some of the groups that you've talked about here, it's both movement and the socialization is such a big part of this. I mean, we talk about happy retirees on average have 3.6 core pursuits, which we think of as hobbies on steroids. And they're not necessarily all active. It could be music or woodworking, but a lot of them do tend to be exercise oriented. So they're walking, the ings, the walking, biking, hiking, running. And then most of those can be really social to your point. So it's certainly a bias of a happy retiree to be doing something that's a core pursuit that's active. And it sounds like these are things that you're constantly trying to get people to do and spread the word. And I love the thought that what an interesting statistic that we've gone from, what is it, 65 plus, only 4% used to be active. Today, now 14% over the last, decade or 2 decades?
Couple decades. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like most of those people probably live in Colorado. No, I don't. It seems that way. Yeah. So they're getting increasingly more active, and I think that's super encouraging. And that was part of the goal with the podcast, is to tap into that demographic and to tap into this whole idea of unretirement. I know you had a podcast recently on unretirement, and this is a trend. People want to continue working, and I think the last statistic I heard was like about 40% of people over 65 decide to return back to work. And so the goal of the podcast was to show people that are finding ways to encourage physical activity as like their second act career. And they know the importance of the social component. So that comes up with all of these podcast episodes, so that they're not just creating an opportunity for older adults to stay active, they're creating opportunity for them to stay social connected, which is the thing that people miss the most when they retire.
So you've seen folks, I mean, you had mentioned a financial advisor who ended up being some sort of coach as well. But so you see people just have never done physical activity as a career at all, just start later in life doing this, not just doing it to get in shape, but actually helping folks.
Yeah. The lady that teaches low flying trapeze, she was in the tech industry before she retired, and now she's teaching low flying trapeze. I had another lady that was a teacher also in IT. And after she retired, she's now teaching a program called Ageless Grace, which is a brain health exercise program. And she's 77, and she's teaching this in a retirement community. So she had no previous experience.
Wait, what is brain? What is that?
Brain health.
What is brain?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that?
So it's using movement to help with cognition. So our body helps our brain think. And so when we move in certain ways, it helps with our cognition, and it helps with thinking. So so this brain health exercise program are giving people exercises that they can do in a group setting that are exercising their brain. So if you want an example of one, you can try drawing a circle with your left hand, and then with your right foot, draw a square on the floor. So
that's pretty tough.
It's making your brain think. It's like rubbing your head, patting your stomach at the same time. So it's a challenge to the brain. But
it's like your left hand and your right hand on the piano doing totally separate things. It does take a lot.
Yeah. But it's a really fun, playful program, and helping people, continue move, but also challenge the brain.
All day long. I'm gonna be wax on over here, draw a square with my foot over here, and it's helping my brain and my body all together.
Yes.
I really do. I will say over the last several months, as I've been back kind of being much more movement oriented, I think a friend of mine asked, "Hey, what kind of workouts are you doing?" And in my mind, I just said, they're just total body. You're doing all this. It's not doing one particular thing. Or I think about a bench press as like a very singular thing. The kind of things that I've been doing have been, let's say squatting and moving a medicine ball all at the same time when you're lunging. And I asked, so at the gym I go to, I asked like, what do you guys call this? I call it total body. And they said functional something, I guess functional working out or functional
training.
Functional movement.
Okay.
Functional movement workouts where you're doing a bunch of different things all at once. And look, I don't know. I hope I keep doing it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope I keep it up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's using, multiple joints. A lot of times that's involved with a lot of functional activities where bicep curls are functional, but, pulling, things like that recruit more muscles. And it is something that we do in day-to-day activities. So trying to mimic day-to-day activities.
Yeah, and I do think it's important. So even FloJo had a coach, and to me, it's that you get a little bit of a nudge when you work with someone. B, you do. I hope, and this is probably not every professional that does this or someone who does this as second act, but I think there is an awful lot to making sure you do not get hurt.
Yeah.
When you start working out, especially when you're newer, or not new, or let's say you've been not as active and then you get active again. It's so easy to kind of get hurt doing it, even a little bit, and then it takes you back off track. And the one thing I've really appreciated with the group that I've used is they were very careful about not getting hurt because they want you to keep coming back. So I just feel like that's a really important question when you're interviewing anyone that's going to help you in movement to really stress so that you don't get hurt.
Yeah, too much too soon is the typical way people get injured, and it really needs to be strategic, what we call progressive overload. Challenging yourself in a very slow, methodical way, especially if you are just getting back into this, and having somebody to guide you through that process.
Strategic progressive load. Yeah, I get that. Maybe I would ask as we kind of wrap up today, where should people go to look and find someone? Is it as simple as a Google, or is there any other place that you should be looking to find someone to help you, whether it's a health coach or a functional integrated nutritionist or a personal trainer? Like, where do we go to find these people?
That's a great question. It depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a personal trainer that's specifically working with older adults, there's a couple places that you can go. Functional Aging Institute is a certifying agency, and they have a directory of people that have been trained there. Idea Fitness is another place that has a directory of health and fitness professionals, and you can see kind of their bio, a little bit of their resume, see what their trainings are to see if they have the training that you are looking for. So I think Idea would be a good fit for people that might be lking.
Idea Fitness is another one. So
yeah, they have a directory. A directory for specific health coaches I'm not aware of, but Idea is probably a great place to start to find health coaches as well as people that are certified in fitness, and make sure that they have the credentials and the training.
But before we go, I also wanted to ask you about your group training. You work with what's the average age of the folks that you typically are working with?
So I teach at a senior living facility, and the average age is probably around 80. And I also do this parkour type, I call it a parkour-based fall resiliency there. So we are doing, we are moving in different and creative ways around hallways and dining rooms. So that's one place that I teach. And then I teach at a senior center, a local senior center. So it's a little bit younger, 70s. And I incorporate some of those parkour type methodologies, but also resistance training so that they are, building up their strength. Because essentially my goal is I want people to be strong and resilient for a lifetime. That's my goal.
What about tell me about was it SilverSneakers? Is that what it is?
There is a fitness program called SilverSneakers. Yes. And it is it's a program that's tied to specific health plans. So when people have a specific health plan, it could be a Medicare Advantage plan, it could be a group retiree plan. They may have that benefit of SilverSneakers, which gives them access to, it could be fitness centers. I think they may have access to online fitness resources. So it is.
Do you like a program like SilverSneakers? Is that known to be good or?
Yeah, it's been great. I actually used to work for SilverSneakers, but
Oh, you
I did, but it's been a long time. It's been a little while since I worked for them. So I think things have evolved since I've worked there, and I don't know how things have changed with the since the pandemic. But it's a fantastic program to get people active, and sometimes it lowers that barrier of I need to pay for a fitness membership. So for some people, it just makes it a little more accessible for them. And there's some great programs going on online for those people and at those participating locations. So it's worth checking to see if people have that benefit.
As we wrap up, one thing that our listeners can do today, Erin, to get motivated to do something.
Yeah. I would just go back to that mindset of how do you need to move today to be able to move tomorrow? What do you need to do to engage in those activities that bring you joy?
It should be fun.
It should be fun.
It should be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Should be fun, social. It shouldn't be a grind.
Exactly.
And then where do we find you? Where do we find more about you and your podcast?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Second Act Fit Pros, and you can find it at all the outlets for podcasts. My website is Erin Eleu, Eleu. I did not do my whole last name. It's too long. But I do have
Erin Eleu. Okay.
Eleu. Yeah, I do teach an online class, the parkour-based fall resiliency program online. So you can do parkour at home. So those are the best places to find me. And I'm also active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to do that too. But those are the best places.
Well, and I bet you're connected to some good folks.
Yes.
I bet you're connected to people that are health oriented, health coach, functional integrated nutritionist. I bet you're connected to some of those folks.
Absolutely. I am happy to connect people.
Oh, cool. Okay. On LinkedIn, I think we'll find Erin Eleuterio.
Yes. Yep.
Right?
Yep. You did it. Perfect.
Erin Eleuterio on LinkedIn as well. So awesome. Well, listen, Erin, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing this idea that movement should be fun. It should be creative. Doesn't have to be that we have to hire an expensive personal trainer to get back in the gym, but just have fun and get back moving again. It's really about your health span as opposed to just your lifespan.
Absolutely.